Hey everyone, my name is Rooster, and welcome back to Mechabellum. Today is another replay of my own up against Galnerius, who recently made a debut as well in the Mag 1 League, so a very high rated game. Much like the previous video where I wanted to talk about a Hound comp, I thought I would try and do the same here for Tarantula. Now, Tarantula is a bit more tricky in the current meta because of the prevalence of Saber, and, well, starting into Saber is a very bad time. But if you pick it and you manage to avoid that matchup, it can still be very powerful. And, well, that's what I'm trying to show you guys here in this particular video. My opponent decides to go for badgers, not sabers, with crawlers. And he is a missile specialist, so perfectly fine matchup for me. And I decide to pick, of course, spiders with crawlers and the training specialist. I think training specialist is very nice when you try and play spiders because they are still very dependent on levels. And that's the one thing that's been nerfed time and time again, is their ability to level up quickly. So if you can avoid that by having intensive training, it's, you know, it's a nice boon to have. So on round one here, I'm going to decide and pick up a Phoenix. Very classic pairing when you're playing Spider. It is almost always going to be what you build for, typically on round two because you can't afford it on round one. But if you have intensive training spec or quick supply or something of the sort, supply specialist even, you can go for it if you have a chaff plus spider opener, because realistically, you're not going to build much else. What you could do here is buy more crawlers if you can't buy a spider, but I typically don't like to go for marksman that much on aggro because the unit is slow. So if you're in a crossfire, you can't really pressure the tower that much and you get a lot of range, right? A lot of marksman stats are in its range, and that's not something it gets to make use of when it's in a headbutt or a close range encounter. So Phoenix is much better, lower range, higher DPS, faster units as well, can move around the battlefield very quickly. So that tends to be a better pairing for aggro. Much like in the Hound video, you're gonna see here, right? Spiders paired up with Chaff. So Chaff behind the spiders here on round one. Sadly, my opponent does buy marksman and immediately locks onto them. But that's something that's easy to fix on round two. I just add some Chaff in the middle here. And I still prefer having the crawlers in the back because they're fast, they can take over, and then we can put something like a Fang in front to tank the initial, you know, lock-ons. Either way, on round one, we're kind of fine. Spiders are tanky, and the Phoenixes do a great job of getting through the enemy chaff clear. So that is round one done with. We do lose our right side tower, but it's not too big of a deal, and it should be something relatively easy to fix in the upcoming rounds. Now, the one downside, I guess, is that my opponent is a missile specialist, right? So I have to be a bit careful about that when going Phoenix. Does that mean that you shouldn't buy a Phoenix? In my opinion, no. If you manage to get to level 2 Phoenix, which we're relatively close to after that round one, you can avoid kind of the break point with Phoenix, so it can survive at least one missile. And you're going to need DPS either way. Level 1 marksman also dies to a missile and does a worse job, right, in this type of scenario, as I explained. So what we can do here is either if you run jump drive, you can click it, or you can buy a mobile beacon and try to dodge the missile, because most likely it will go onto the Phoenixes. Round number two, we get wasp drop, which I'm going to pick up. Again, you could go for something like Rhino here if you want to. Void Eye is not a bad pairing with Spider either, but I already made my DPS choice, and I need to deal with the wasp myself, right? If we're being completely honest, I don't have a great way of dealing with it. My opponent likely picks it because both of us are weak to it. So oftentimes you will just see a bit of a handshake where both people pick the wasp, and you hope that you get out ahead, or at least you win the main fight and then your wasps clean up their wasps. That's kind of the idea there. Mobile beacon picked up. I did intensive my spider on round one to put the intensive training on cooldown. I now have the money to pick up the level. Important thing to do, right? Unit becomes a lot tankier. We'll have the DPS to kill mid-sized units. And, I mean, it's just a good thing to do. And then we still have money to go for a Fang in the middle here to stop those insta-locks from happening again. And I'm going to go for a right side kind of defense here, protecting the flank. Also dealing with those crawlers. It does mean that the wasp, which my opponent put on his main board, is not going to be dealt with, really. But, I mean, I have to kind of hedge here between two different plays where my right side is still open, and I thought maybe my opponent would try and attack it with the wasp. Doesn't do so. We do dodge the missile successfully, so that's a nice little thing, and hopefully the Phoenixes can at least make a dent in the opponent's wasp forces here. My Tarantula level 1 got locked on again, so it looks like we're going to need a second pack of chaff in front to prevent that from happening. But my level 2 spider does a good job here of cleaning most of my opponent's badgers. Eventually we do go down because of the wasps, but that's something that we can fix by adding either some more wasps or some late fangs here to arrive and deal with that wasp pack my opponent has. Pretty okay round, I'd say, all around. I don't take too much damage. My opponent does get a level on his marksman, which isn't ideal, but I'll take this. I think it was a bit of a rough round because we also had to deal with the missile specialist, right? So it is my opponent's power spike turn. And, well, I had to make a bit of a guess as to, you know, whether the wasp would get picked up, where it would go. And overall, we now at least don't have to worry too much about the right side. And we can focus on the left. It's a bit of a slow to get going composition, right? Spiders need a lot of investment to get going. So if you can at least minimize the damage taken early, that tends to be a good sign for you. Round number 3, shield airdrop here, lovely spell to pick up. I think the rest is not really playable. I already have wasps, so I don't want to nerf my existing wasps. This doesn't make any sense in a headbutt, and amplifying core could get picked up for a big spider, but it's just a little bit expensive, and I've got other things in mind, like, you know, using my intensive training, getting range on my Tarantula, maybe even mechanical rage, AP. So I didn't want to spend 200 on the item there this early on. I also wanted to pick up my Phoenix level, which we finally got. And because I have the Phoenix level, I should take the defense enhancement. That way my Phoenixes get to survive a missile strike. Important breakpoint there. And, well, we beacon our wasps because that's the only thing that can get missiled, right? So you kind of have to guess, like, oh, what is my most vulnerable target whenever you're playing against missile strike? And is there a way that I can easily prevent them from dying? Sometimes you might just say, I don't care about it dying, you know, I'll just tank it. But, you know, in this case, the wasps are the only thing you can realistically missile that are worth the most, so that's what we beacon. I also level my right side tower. I use intensive training to level up my other spider to kind of even things out between the middle of the board and the left. And you can see that I also added a fang here on the right to prevent this insta-lock, and I put a fang to cover both my left side tower and also to arrive at the right time to deal with this wasp pack, because ideally I would have something to help out my phoenixes to get rid of that pack, and I think fangs do good enough of a job at it if you're only dealing with a single pack of wasp. Once you see a bigger investment from your opponent, you know, 2-3 packs of wasp, at that point you can start thinking about buying some mustangs or a wraith. All of that is fine. I don't run AA on my spiders, but I don't think that you should click it unless you're very late in the game and you've already gotten range and an HE or mech rage, and then you can think about clicking AA. But I don't think you should click it very early on into wasps, because it'll just make the rest of your you know, purchases much more expensive, and it'll also overload your spiders, because the spiders are there to deal with the small stuff, often also with some of the mid-sized stuff, like the badgers in this case. And if you wanted to deal with anti-air as well, that's 3 different jobs. You're gonna need a lot of money and a lot of deployments, which you simply won't have early on. So try and deal with the wasps in a different manner, which in this case is just fine to do with some fangs, because I don't see a massive investment. Another missile strike shows up on round 4. I'm not too interested with the rest here. Efficient giant manufacturing is always an option, but, you know, it only pays off with 4 giants, and I don't see myself spamming more than 4 giants. Realistically here, I don't need anything. You can play something like Raiden or Overlord with spiders, but, you know, getting 4 of those is gonna take a while, and I'm perfectly happy with the situation I'm in currently. So I just skip. I take the missile strike. We're gonna use that on the right side to get rid of some chaff. And I was thinking, well, maybe I can, you know, try and also pressure that right side a little bit. Oil gets used for my opponent. He did pick counterfire on the badgers, so whenever they get hit, they will have more range, and they're also a bit tankier. Interesting tech setup there. Has some synergy as well with Scorching Charge, just kind of stacking the HP, so maybe we'll see that at some point. But for the time being, I'm not too worried. I think spiders are a lot better here, especially with the levels that I can guarantee. And now we get range on our spiders. This is very similar to the Hound video I made a couple days ago, where you really want to invest as much as possible into your chaff clear of choice. So you will see some similarities in that game and this game, where, you know, I invest a lot into the Hounds and I pair it with a ton of chaff and a minimal amount of anti-air and DPS, because I don't need, you know, a ton of DPS in this particular scenario. If my opponent shows up with, you know, a Fortress or a Scorpion, maybe I need to think about, you know, buying another Phoenix in case of a Fortress, maybe a Melter. But as long as that's not the case, you want to just keep investing into your chaff clear, because once you get that scaled, you're going to be in a really good spot, and you can then use unit drops or whatever, you know, resources you have in the mid to late game to get your DPS going. And honestly, chaff clear can also become DPS if it's, you know, got enough levels, enough techs. If you get the attack and defense enhancements, even the second ones early, they can become a real menace. So here you see that our investment pays off. I go for range first, and now I'm thinking, ooh, maybe I just want to get mech rage, because my opponent isn't really building anything that spiders are too scared about. Like, you know, maybe a hacker, or, as I mentioned, a Fortress, a Sabertooth. So once I get going, you know, I might even be able to deal with those units if they show up too late. And one great way, I think, to play carry Spider is to have Mechanical Rage on the bar, so that when you see that you have a good early game, you can consistently get the levels, you can click that tech instead. It's somewhat similar to high explosive ammo, because it will still help you chaff clear faster, but you don't lose the DPS as you would with HE. And in fact, you gain some DPS by well, just increasing your attack rate. So that is a very, very nice tech to click. If your opponent doesn't have a million chaff units, I think it's the best tech to click second. If your opponent is playing like a ton of crawlers and fangs, then HE would still be best. But yeah, in this case, I think, well, it's going to help me kill those badgers a lot faster. It'll help me kill the little bit of chaff that my opponent has as well. So let's just immediately go for mech rage. I'm very healthy. I can afford to stall the DPS a little bit, whereas my opponent has to invest in DPS because he cannot get rid of my spiders. So I kind of let my opponent show his hand here, make the first move, which is going to be the sabers. Good move by him. Kind of the quintessential counter to Spider, aside from maybe Hacker. And yeah, immediate double shot, triple saber, good move by him, and I go for Mechanical Rage. My opponent tries to get my tower here with a wasp drop plus a missile on my fangs. A couple of them survive. Hopefully they'll get pulled towards this side here. I didn't really play around that particular play, but a lot of options were available, and I don't really think that was necessarily worth playing around. I do move all of my wasps here over to the left, so maybe we can catch them before they get the tower. Doesn't quite look like it though, a little bit too late there, and sadly that does mean that his saber gets to take out my spider. But you can see we're still doing a pretty good job. I mean, my opponent went for triple saber, but triple saber at level 1 versus level 2 spiders with double tech is not as convincing of a matchup as you would maybe think. Spiders can fight back into saber if they have level advantages, and that I certainly do. Round number 6, bunch of spells, nuke, incendiary bomb. Not too interested in those. I think you can pretty effectively stop them by just buying some shields. Also, the shield airdrop is back. And instead, I now decide to go for an item that I can put on one of my high-level spiders. So I was talking about the amplifying core before. Great item. Would have been picked up here as well, but I get the absorption module instead. And now I actually have the money to justify it. So level 3 spider, double tech with an absorption module. That'll be able to fight back against those low-level sabers quite well. I use my shield on the left side. I do have to shield a little bit here to try and deal with, well, maybe an aggressively positioned fire or a nuke. And I decide to go for AP as well on my spiders because I felt like, well, with the levels, I could really try and just kill sabers with spiders. It's perfectly possible in this scenario. I have the intensive, and again, I have those levels. So I decide to click AP, and I'm kind of just waiting things out. Again, I'm very healthy. I don't need to do much. I'm waiting for the unit drop as well. That should come next round, because we haven't seen one on round 5 and 6. And I wanted to see what that had. So whenever you're in this type of scenario, you're healthy, your board seems to do just fine, you have buttons to click that would make your existing units better, it's often the right move to just click those buttons, wait for the unit drop, then get your, you know, maybe scaling DPS option from the unit drop. Another flank here with a missile from my opponent, with a real wasp this time, and the same missile strike as we saw before. And yes, I could probably play around this and level this tower, but I don't really care. Like, I just don't really care. I have almost 4,000 hit points. If my opponent wants to go for these type of plays, they're not going to finish me off. They might make me lose a round. Maybe I should be a bit scared of the whole scaling aspect of things. Like, if these sabers get a bunch of levels, which they should get now. In fact, they do. I could get into some trouble. But I just wanted to play the full scaling game. And, well, it costs me this round. I do take some damage. The opponent gets the levels on the sabers, which they were likely looking for. But I'm healthy, and I can take a hit. Now, round 7, we get the unit drop. We have all the information available. I'm up against sabers. Is there something here that I want to play? And it turns out that no, not really. If it was a giant here, like a Raiden or, you know, an Overlord, Fortress, I would probably have considered playing it, but it's all mid-sized units that I don't really need. I can pick the Farseer just to deal with the wasps. My Chaff Clear is good enough, so I don't really care about Wraith. Steel Ball is alright as well. I could go for some type of Steel Ball play. It is a very good unit into Saber, so that would have been a consideration. And Phantom Ray, not bad either. Could go for an aggressive play here on the right side. I opted to go for the Farseer to just, you know, cover this flank easily because another missile strike was available. And I was like, alright, I'm getting a bit tired of this whole, like, left side missile my fang, attack my tower thing. So I decided to cover it that way. My opponent goes for the right side attack. Alternatively, what I would have done here was likely pick the Phantom Ray because it's, you know, better than the Steel Ball, or it has the winning matchup between those units. So it's a bit of a risky play by my opponent here. He does put the Wasp in front, and the missile as well, to try and take out whatever I would put there. But I think, normally speaking, what I would have done here is put a Crawler and the double Phantom behind, in his case as well. And then go for the same play, but with a Crawler in front, instead of this. Because it's more expensive, and Crawler double Phantom would win here. But yeah, I don't really defend against that too well. I do have a missile there. I do move my wasps, but looks like I am going to lose my tower. Now, it is fortified, but 7 seconds of debuff is still quite a lot. And we're going to have to see how well we do. But maybe I can slow down his push a little bit. My opponent guesses correctly now where I'm going to be moving my wasps after I've been moving them a whole bunch. But as you can see on the left side, we're not even doing too bad. I do lose my tower relatively fast, but already a couple of sabers on my opponent's board have gone down. But yeah, the remainder is enough to take out the spiders I still had. I did range my phoenixes now because I felt like, well, there was no fortress anti-air drop. And my phoenixes are high level enough that I think I should be able to carry with them. If Fortress AA would come out, I would have something like Quantum Reassembly or Charge Shot. Plus the levels to be able to at least tank one volley. So that's kind of when you can make the decision to go into Phoenix carry. Up until this point, you kind of just, you know, cruise without having it. And if Fortress AA shows up in the second unit drop, you often pivot out and go for something different. If not, you can decide to go for Phoenix carry. Round number 8, and we have mass-produced Rhino. And I think to myself, ooh, that's kind of a fun card. I want to try and go for a little bit of a fun play here. I do run Final Blitz on my Rhinos, which is not something that I click very often, but in this scenario, it seemed like the perfect use case. Mass-produced Rhino, 100 cost Rhino, but they still will have 17,000 hit points here. And I can just use them to blow up the entirety of that enemy attack for very cheap. And my opponent will likely not be expecting it. So there we go. Another spider on the right side here could be a nice thing, as I'm currently only invested on the left side of the board, but I did have to use my deployments to buy those 2 Rhinos. And well, since I don't really have many more deployments left, I decided to click the doubled attack and defense enhancements as well. Anytime you've kind of done your round, you have a lot of money to spare, it's often worthwhile to click these, especially when you have invested a lot into things like you know, chaff clear that kind of turns into DPS. Opponent here decides to go for more Mustangs, which can often be a... Oh, as he undoes. Okay, buys them in at level 1 instead. can often be a good late game addition to your board. They kind of help out with a little bit of everything. Wasp plays can be pesky in the late game when, you know, the final rounds roll around. You can sometimes get cheesed by a mass wasp play, so it's a nice thing to have just because of that. And then on top of that, they also double down as a form of late chaff when the rest of your army has died, or the rest of your chaff has died. Also, my opponent went for Scorching Charge. It's doing alright for him. I think it's kind of backfiring as well at the same time. Like, you can see a lot of his units are also burning up because I just kill the Badgers before they really manage to, you know, charge in and hit my board. And now the left side is suddenly starting to collapse a little bit. Turns out that, you know, all of those plays, the debuffs, that type of stuff, was helping out my opponent significantly. And all of a sudden, now that there's no debuff anymore and I defended the right side adequately, the spiders are truly online and they're showing how strong they can be. So we managed to make a bit of a comeback here, and hopefully we can manage to keep that going as we enter round number 9 with another unit drop. This time around, again, Phantom Ray shows up. I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm happy with the board I have. I could pick up this. I could also just go for the Wraith and sell it. I decided to go for the Wraith, and I do recover the resources. My opponent decides to go for the Phantom Rays here with shield, which I thought was a bit of a weird play considering, well, I do have Phoenixes there, and as far as I'm aware, they do one-shot the Phantoms. Of course, they need 2 shots now with the shield, but that's not going to do too much. Opponent goes for Hackers, which I expected, because Hackers with enhanced control is one of the ways you can deal with Boom Rhinos. So I decided to do a little bit of a funny play and go for Hackers as well, but with barriers covering my Rhinos so that we can hack his stuff, because Hackers are also good into Scorching Charge Fire Badgers and Mass Steel Ball, and the barrier is very useful against Hackers. So that was the idea here. Hopefully I can somehow ping-pong the Rhinos back and forth. Although with enhanced control, I might be a little bit unfavored. We buy a bunch of crawlers. I go for Subterranean Blitz as well. Really good tech to click. It's pretty useful into fire, honestly, after all the fire nerfs. And it's still the best tech on crawler by a landslide. Very, very powerful to go for late game, especially if you've got second defense enhancement. Kind of a no-brainer to go for. Opponent has a whole bunch of wasp swarms. Decides to go on the left side instead. I do have a missile there, but it's going to get triggered by the crawler. I'm hoping here that we somehow manage to not get debuffed. The crawlers will likely just draw all of those wasps into the main board. It does mean that my phoenixes turn around and don't help out, but as you can see, my spiders are doing kind of well by themselves. I mean, look at the amount of damage that's happening over here. Like, this spider is not messing about. It's honestly doing more damage. I mean, it's top on damage. It's top on everything on my team. Compared to those phoenixes. Right side did kind of collapse. It looks like I didn't quite manage to win against the enhanced control Hackers, but I stalled for long enough, and this tower is level 3, so I wasn't too afraid of losing it. Even if I do, it's only 5 seconds of debuff. We take out all of the enemy shields. The left side again moves in, and we are going to be winning this round. It's not going to be enough to kill, though. It's going to come down to round 10 most likely. I am still at a little bit of a scary health total myself. And, well, my opponent might be able to still finish me here. I think it's a bit of a precarious situation. Those sabers can be scary if my opponent manages to chaff clear all of my stuff really fast and get the lock-ons that he needs. Round number 10, Amplifying Core shows up. This time around I will pick it. Another Absorption was available too. That would have been a fine pick. I decided to go for the Amplifying Core, throw it onto another spider. Fire is back, so we're going to have to shield if possible. I go for Enhanced Control Hackers myself, as it felt like a pretty decent play, and I'm going to go for likely more Hackers at this point, because I already double-teched them. My opponent goes for a Mountain, which I did not expect, but it is still a play you can make in the late game if you want to try and, you know, kind of stat check your opponent and go for a Hail Mary gut shot, which looks a little bit scary. I don't know if we're going to have the right amount of damage, but I did plan to go for Hackers, you know, a little bit everywhere here. I'm going to be putting at least one of them on the left. I didn't really have the money to buy a ton more, so that's why you also see me go for some normal bubbles. And I just go for a Hacker and a Crawler. But this hacker is facing the mountain. And because we're in such low range, the lack of range on the hacker doesn't really matter. So we're likely going to be locking onto this. And if we have the DPS, we might be able to just take over that mountain ourselves. We're just going to have to see how fast this can get in and how long these spiders can survive. Of course, I'm missiling here the crawlers on the flanks to try and, well, free up all of my units as quick as possible. I tried to missile. My opponent guesses correctly as to where I was going to missile, so it doesn't hit anything. But look at that mountain. I mean, it is getting absolutely deleted here by the AP Mech Rage spiders and my phoenixes. And we managed to take it over. Apologies there, as I have a little bit of a cough, but we managed to take over the entire board with a bit of a crazy ending. And the spider carry does end up winning. And the spider carry is victorious. Now, my opponent definitely could have won this game, I'm pretty sure. I get a little bit fortunate here on the left by having that hacker there. Although, to be honest, it felt like I was just gonna kill that anyway. It honestly really died very, very quickly to the high-level phoenixes and the high-level spider, which ends up doing almost 500,000 damage across the entire game. Of course, it was a bit of a beast with the level 4, the item, the triple tech, the double attack enhancement. But it shows you how much spiders can really do. I will go back to round 9, because I think here with the unit drop, my opponent could have done, or could have gone for a better play. And let's just take over as our opponent and see if we can get a victory here. I would likely go for the phantoms. I think that we can go for something like this and try to target those rhinos. If my opponent had burst, which he doesn't have, I probably would have tried to click that, but we can't go for it here. Now, I will likely go for a double missile in the middle here, because you can stack your missiles, and then they do take out level 2 phoenixes, plus the crawler that's behind if there's no shield. We need to shield ourselves, so let's do that somewhere over here. Go for another shield over there, and then maybe one over here. And then probably one over here to cover the badgers. I will sell my steel balls and probably move some of this stuff backwards a little bit. Missile that flank crawler because it's annoying. Missile back here probably in case another flank shows up. Missile over here to get rid of those crawlers fast. And then we have some other stuff to do. I'll take the levels. I'll go for temp range, temp speed. We have a wasp available. Let's try and annoy these phoenixes over here because we can kind of spawn the wasps on top of them. And the anti-wasp clearance is not that great. And then we still have a ton of cash. So let's go for double sabers here and line them up with those rhinos. Make sure that they insta-lock. Go for double attack and defense enhancement. And then we still have a little bit of cash left with which we can buy another crawler perhaps. So let's just do that. And then I think that's just gonna be the round, honestly. Let's see how this goes. So now we have hackers. The sabers do take out those units. The rhinos just completely destroy the hackers. The left side looking very, very good. Right side doing its best. Sabers are locking on to the spiders. And honestly, even take them out. Oh, wow. This is just a complete wash. Okay. I was going to say, there was definitely a way for my opponent to win here. And turns out, yes, you can win with a pretty decent margin. 3.5k damage. I wasn't quite expecting that, but yeah. That would have been more than enough. 2,000 damage overkill on round number 9. Yeah, just buy more sabers, right? If you're up against those spiders. A little bit of a cheeky play here on the left side. You can counter that as well with the sabers. And, well, it would have gone a lot better for my opponent. Also, utilizing the spells, right? I don't think that he double missiled my Phoenix. Or I don't think he spawned the wasps either on top of the phoenixes there. Which just helps a ton. But, yeah, showcases you what you can do if you're facing this. I still think that spider carry can be a thing. It's a little bit harder to get going. I think, you know, the hound comp I showed you guys is better. But if you happen to play this, especially if you're sub 2k MMR, I think this type of spider comp will work just fine for you. Now, if you happen to face sabers and you picked spider, you might wonder, what do I do now? I think the best thing is to still probably set up in a headbutt and then plan to immediately sell out of your spiders on round 2 and swap them for Wraith. So you basically play a headbutt with Wraith, and you use all of the cash that you gained from selling your spiders to invest back into Wraith, and then you just end up playing something like a Wraith Steel Ball. If you're not up against Sabers, you can go for this comp, but I think playing Spider into Saber from the start is just, generally speaking, going to be a horrible, horrible time. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought about it. Have you tried to play Spider, or do you just avoid it on the current patch? Be sure to let me know. If you want to stay up to date with my latest content, please consider subscribing. And if you want to see me play live, check me out on Twitch. With that being said, take care guys, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.